Hey guys, what's up? It's John. As promised, I wanted to do a deck profile for my Bloomlord deck. I went undefeated with this deck at the Double Typhoon Cup. This was the prize card. I'm not going to get too heavy into the matchups that I faced because I went through those in the vlog. But I wanted to give a deck profile because this is my favorite Digimon deck. It is also the deck that I have played the longest. So we're going to start with the eggs first. I like to play 4 copies of Kokomon. Kokomon is really, in my opinion, my favorite green egg that I want to go into. The draw power is just so important. Anytime you suspend something, you're going to be able to draw a card and help dig out your pieces. To round off the eggs, I am playing 1 single copy of Argamon. This used to be the 4 of egg that I ran until I started playtesting the Kokomons, and I just like the draw better. Having a 5th egg is kind of mandatory in my mind, as you will see as I get deeper into the deck list. Having that 1 extra can be the difference between having a successful bloom turn. We're going to then move on to our rookies. We are running 4 copies of BT15 Palmon. This card has really become a staple for Bloomlord and, in my opinion, green decks in general. This is a lot of pressure for your opponent to deal with. If you evo into it in the back, they know you're going to promote it, so their options are either give you a body that you could eventually get memory from or find a way to deal with it. This is definitely a staple. Next, we are running 3 copies of the BT10 Palmon. This is a card that I always had at a solid 4 of in every other bloom list I had ever made. It wasn't until recently that I started out the 3, and I've really enjoyed this. Because of the Kokomon and other things in our deck, we are able to search for cards. This is really good because in this deck it's a double hit, and being able to grab 2 things off the top of your deck is really great. We have ways to play it out. Really love this card. It's a really good card. Next, we are running 4 copies of the all new Palmon X Antibody from BT15. This card is kind of all you would really want it to be. Being able to just promote your Palmon, go straight into X, immediately get your 2 memory is really solid. All in all, really love this card. To round it off, we are playing 1 copy of the BT3 Terriermon and 1 copy of the BT9 Palmumon. These are kind of my tech choices in my level 3 slots. For the Green Cup, I found that the Terriermon did not show up as much, given that I only played against 1 Bloomlord, but I still nevertheless think it's a really good card. It can really be frustrating to certain decks. The Palmumon's really great. The problem with Palmumon is you have to be careful not to lock your board down before you can establish it. It's something I've been guilty of doing a few times, and you definitely learn from those mistakes. Nevertheless, though, it's just a really strong card. Moving on to the level 4s, we have 3 copies of the BT13 Sunflowermon. This is a card that at first I didn't really enjoy too much, and it wasn't until I started playing the list that I am now that I started to really understand the value in this card. It can make a lot of plays possible. We're always trying to build into a level 6. Being able to reduce, if not our level 5s, then our level 6s, helps us raise that possibility that we're going to be able to keep turn once we do digivolve into that, and if not, we're able to hopefully choke our opponent to less memory. I really like this card. I like it at 3. Next up, we have 3 copies of the BT14 Togemon. This is a card that I've learned to really enjoy. Once again, being able to suspend something is always really nice. Being able to play out one of your tamers is even nicer. I really enjoyed this card. Finally, we have 3 copies of the BT10 Sunflowermon. This is, bread and butter from old Bloomlord. Being able to evo into this and play something else out, whether it's a searcher or something that can reduce costs to go into something else, is always really nice. The inheritable is super solid. Being able to draw cards, when this card is used correctly and at the right time, it really helps to build your board and your stacks. So really a big fan of this card. Moving on to our level 5s, we have 3 copies of the BT10 Agitarmon. This is honestly like the go-to staple for Bloomlord. I think if you are playing Bloomlord and you are not currently running this card, at least more than 2, I would definitely recommend trying it at a higher number. The inheritable, being able to gain yourself a memory, and then just the skill itself, being able to play anything 3k or less by suspending it's really great. This is actually something that you can digivolve in the back before you promote, and then you know you're going to be able to have at least 2 bodies just by its skill, and then you can Bloomlord if you have enough memory, and now we're able to make plays off of it because this is a main skill, not a win digivolving skill. Really enjoy this card. Next up, we have 2 copies of the BT14 Lilymon Ace. I'm not a huge fan of the Ace mechanic. I think it's really cool, but overflow does suck. This card in the right situation can be really nice. If you are going second and your opponent gives you 3 memory and they hard play a Digimon that is 5000 DP or less, Evo in the back, and then hard play Lilymon Ace, choke them to 1, and then bottom deck their Digimon. Really enjoy this card. Next up, we have 2 copies of the BT10 Cherrymon. DigiZorption is really solid. It's really good. I mean, you can Evo into this for 1, and now you have a redirector. Unless you're running 4 to 3 copies of Hydramon, there's not a lot of play you have outside of Lilymon Ace to deal with your opponent on their turn. Having this adds a wall of defense that we do have, so either they have to remove it or they know they're going to have to sacrifice a swing that's not going into security or one of our other Digimon. So I really like this card. I think it's very solid. We are then playing 1 copy of the BT3 Blossomon and 1 copy of the BT2 Argamon. These are both restricted. I think playing them at 1 is worth it. These cards, when they have popped up in my games, have always had an effect. It never felt like a bad draw. It always felt like a good card. These are both cards I would rather have in my hand over some of the other level 5s in most cases. Free DigiZorption, free evolution is really solid. Blossomon is searchable. Unfortunately, Argamon is not, but to balance that out, Argamon has a really nice inheritable that allows us to play out a rookie green Digimon. If we have 3 bodies and this is under Bloom and we swing with it, we can throw out the other 4th body, and now Bloomlord is a higher number and swinging for more checks. I understand some people do not like playing the Argamon, and that's totally fine. Just for me and my preference, I really like the card, so I'm going to keep playing it. Moving on to the level 6s, of course, we're going to be playing 4 copies of the BT10 Bloomlord Mon. This is your go-to. I mean, this is what wins you games. This is what gets all of the damage in. This is what your opponent does not like to see. This is one of my favorite cards, obviously. It's just a really solid card. I don't think it's anything crazy top tier. I wouldn't even call it meta, but I will say that it's a ton of fun to play, and I still think this card is really solid. Next up, we are playing 2 copies of the new Quantumon. I'll be honest, I think I want this card at 3. I don't think people have slept on it. I don't think it's broken, but it is good. The protection is super important. When you're playing against blue decks, it's really nice because you don't have to worry about it. I feel that this card adds a touch, and I mean a very small touch, of control to Bloomlord. You have the option of recovery or removal, and I think that's really solid. It's a fairy, which means that it's searchable by all of our searchers. We can reduce the cost of it with the Sunflower Mon. I mean, there's just a lot of reasons why I love this card. I think it's really good at 2, but I definitely want to try it out at 3. Finally, to round off our level 6s, we are playing 1 copy of the EX3 Hydramon. I still think this is a decent card. It's just that sometimes it feels worse to go into this than Quantumon or Bloomlord. It has situations where it does come up and this card's really nice, but most of the time I would personally rather see a Quantumon or a Bloomlord over the Hydramon. Finally, to wrap off our Digimon, we are playing 2 copies of Quartzmon. I've seen some lists that run 1 copy of Quartz, 3 copies of Quartz. Nevertheless, this card is really solid. It's still really good, especially when we're playing a deck that's going to be building a board. If our opponent doesn't answer that board, we can always Quartzmon for cheaper than we normally would. I've been playing it at 2 for a little while now. When I feel like I need to see it, I see it. There are very few games where I don't see this card unless they ended up in security somewhere. I still think this card is really solid. I do think it's a really good 2 of. Maybe I would be open to experimenting it at 3, but right now I've really enjoyed it at 2. Moving on to our tamer cards, first off we're going to be playing 2 copies of the BT13 Yoshino. I still think this is a really good card outside of Rosemon. It's a memory setter, which is something we really care about. And then the second skill is something that's really nice because it doesn't require anything too specific. All it requires is that we digivolve into a vegetation, plant, or fairy. Some of the other tamers, while I do like all the other green tamers, I feel like this skill to gain memory out of all the tamers is probably my favorite, just because it's something that I feel is super easy. So I really enjoy this card. I like it at 2. Next up, we are playing 2 copies of the BT14 Mimi. This is a prime example of why I really like Yoshino. I understand that this tamer serves a bit of a different purpose. To gain a memory off of Mimi, we have to suspend a Digimon. I do like this card. I do think it's a good card. I don't want to play it higher than 2. It's a searcher, which is something that we really care about in this deck. Still love this card, still think it's a really good card. To round off the tamers, we are playing 2 copies of the BT1 Mimi. I think this is debatably one of the best green tamers. I think debatably this is the best green tamer in all of Digimon. It's a setter, something we really care about. And then you're able to just swing for games sometimes. Being able to have an extra body in the back that can either swing or being able to promote something that can swing for game is very important, especially for Bloomlord, where we care about how many bodies we have and how many attacks we can make. Having a BT1 Mimi is super important. It's something that I value a lot and I really enjoy in the deck. To start off on our options, we are playing 3 copies of agility training. There's not really a time where you don't want to see this card. Being able to search is super important. We're a combo deck, so being able to grab pieces is super nice. It is something where I am seeing it every game, so really love this card. To round off our options, of course, we are playing the one card that should not be playable. This is a card that when you see it, it matters. I don't think there's ever been a game where I've seen this card and it has not affected the game some way. I do understand people's frustration whenever they have to play against this card. I do understand why people think it shouldn't be in the game, and as somebody who does play a green deck, I could agree with that statement. It is something though that if Bandai is gonna let me play it as a one-of, I'm going to play it as a one-of. It's way too good, and I think Bandai should get around to fixing that issue. So all in all, this is the list that I'm going to continue to play in BT15 for Bloomlord. By no means do I think this is the best Bloomlord deck list. This is the Bloom deck list that I am most comfortable playing. This is the one that I have spent way too much time play testing. It's a deck that I really like. I really think it's enjoyable. It's a super fun deck to play. Let me guys know what you think about my deck list down in the comments below. If there's anything you think that you would change, or maybe something that you're running differently in your deck, I'd love to hear your comments about it. With that said, I'll see y'all guys in the next video. See you later.